ACT branch of the Australian Institute of International Affairs. My name is Heath McMichael and I'm branch president. COVID-19 has driven many non-profit organisations such as ours to new heights of innovation. This evening, for the first time, our guest speaker's presentation with a physically distanced audience here in Canberra at the AIIA National Studio will be live streamed to a virtual audience with you in Zoomland. Our topic tonight is the deepening of bilateral relations between India and Australia. In recent years, we have progressed a long way from seeing our shared interests defined by cricket and the Commonwealth, important as they are. Amongst the breakthroughs have been former DFAT Secretary Peter Varghese landmark India Economic Strategy of 2018 and the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership signed virtually by our two Prime Ministers last June. It is a privilege to have with us tonight His Excellency Mr. Gitesh Sarma, the High Commissioner of India to Australia, to provide his perspective on these developments. Mr. Sarma joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1986 and has had overseas assignments in Russia, Ukraine, Hong Kong, Pakistan, and the UK. He has been India's ambassador to Uzbekistan and High Commissioner in Fiji. He's also worked for the state of Andhra Pradesh in their Information Technology Department and served in India's Department of Atomic Energy. Before taking up his present post in Canberra in November 2019, Mr. Sarma was Secretary West in the Ministry of External Affairs. Now, as per normal, following the High Commissioner's remarks, we will take questions from both our in-house audience and our online participants via the Q&A function on Zoom. Now, for the virtual amongst us, you can vote on questions raised by others by pressing the thumbs up icon at the bottom of your screen. We will aim to have as many questions answered as time allows and finish at 7 p.m. Now I call on the High Commissioner to deliver his remarks. Excellency.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and I'm absolutely delighted to attend this hybrid meeting. It's been quite a while that we've had this privilege. Certainly it's a sign of times that there is a scope for optimism, that we are able to do certain things which even 1 month back it was not possible. But first and foremost, the very fact that I'm here in this Australian Institute of International Affairs, which is about to complete 100 years in about 4 years' time, that itself is a great honor. And institutions are not just about bricks and mortar, they're about traditions of debate and great intellectual activity. So I can feel that, I can sense that pandemic will come and go, but we will continue to work for what we are designed to do. And in this case, let me compliment you for finding this method of working. My aim is really, end of the day, not to make a heavy presentation, but certainly to give my perspective. And sometimes I find that, when we casually sit in various lounges or airport, facilities or club, we pick up a periodical and we start from the rear side. It's sometimes instinctive. I don't know why I found many of my colleagues. Sometimes even mystery books, people don't have the, kind of, energy or enthusiasm to read through the whole thing. They want to know what's at the end of it. Who did it. So I think the news is good. I think if I talked of the end first, I would say that this is indeed an exciting time for our relations. And this relationship is not just, it's not enough to understand this relationship. It's also important to sense and feel this relationship, because that is the kind of, bondings we have had through history and through the Commonwealth, the other kind of common elements that are there between us, the common interests that we have. So it is a kind of relationship. Every Indian in some way relates to Australia in some way, and now to discuss the relationship as between two countries, that is another kind of aspect. I do have a personal stake in this relationship too. I studied in a school with Australian missionaries, and I never thought one day I'd come here as High Commissioner. I remember when I was in grade 6, I made a boomerang and threw it some distance. It did work, and under supervision of Australian teachers, so it's, I think almost every Indian can produce something of this kind, this personal angles. So let's begin with that kind of understanding that India and Australia have this huge potential built on that interest in each other. I noticed with great interest. Last week we celebrated our Independence Day. Prime Minister Scott Morrison, in his greetings to the vibrant Indian diaspora, almost 700,000 now here on our Independence Day, he rather eloquently summed up our partnership. He said, "Our cultures might be different, but we believe in similar things. We believe in the supremacy of the ballot box in our national life, in the rule of law, in institutions that safeguard rights and responsibilities of free people to build a better world." These are not just elections for sake of elections. They lead to change of governments as well. They express the will of people in different ways. They like policies or don't like policies. So let's end that democracy debate. If we are on such a footing where we know we're comfortable with each other because the way we operate is on the basis of democratic values. So that is what we mean when we say ours is a natural partnership based on shared values and shared interests. And it also has an enormous respect for diversity. Uh, India is civilization goes back to 5,000 years, and we have immense diversity. Even in this room, we have some colleagues, and if we each speaks a different language, and we won't understand each other ordinarily, and yet we all have that sense that this is one great civilization as far as India is concerned. Australia has also one notes that Australia has also become a very diverse society, and it's really it's a great country. It's a wonderful country for an immigrant. He gets such opportunities, amazing opportunities. Australians respect the Aussie way, respect those who work hard, respect the local ways of doing things. And every immigrant here has those kind of freedom to stick to his own cultural traditions, and also enjoy the best of Australia, and that's what they do. So that's why we are so comfortable with each other. Indeed, we are also increasingly sensing that there is a shared geography too. Much before or just about the time when this lockdown happened, this unfortunate turn of events, the last visit I made outside Canberra, I actually went to Western Australia. And I had a series of meetings lined up, but even before the meeting, the first meeting, I zipped across to Fremantle. I pulled out my iPhone and looked at which direction is India, and I looked towards that. I just soaked in the ocean air and kept looking there. And it is amazing, to sense that you can actually draw a straight line from there to India, to the eastern seaboard, without any of this little clutter of islands, a small group of islands, or anything in between. There is a straight line, check it out. So that is the kind of, geographical dimension to our relationship that we're beginning to sense, that there is an ocean, and whether ocean divides us or joins us. I think I would tend to say that ocean brings us together in very easy ways. The virtual summit, as you have yourself alluded to, on 4th June was historic, truly historic, and we decided to elevate our relations to comprehensive strategic partnership. We are like abbreviations, so CSP we shall say. And this comes 11 years after forging a strategic partnership in 2009. So within a decade, you have moved from strategic to comprehensive strategic. I noticed there are some ambassadors and very distinguished colleagues from DFAT, or those who have been associated with DFAT. These are not just words or terms. When we work on them, there's a lot of passion which goes into finalizing these documents, and they do reflect the times. And comprehensive means practically you can engage in any aspect of life and any area you can work together. And strategic would mean it's not just a transactional kind of, it's a partnership. We are there together for the long distance, for the long haul. So it is a CSP which really answers the demand of today's international relations, the expectation of people in our two countries, and it is something that we have to realize through our practical work. It is marked by growing convergence of approaches on geostrategic issues, and to work together for a very strong and prosperous region. I should tell you that in my 8-9 months, it would be odd to say that we agree and we have the same position on everything. But what is remarkable is every time that we engage with each other, even when there is these variations are there, there is always that immense respect for the other side, the views on the other side, the opinions of the other side. That shows that there is that understanding that each country, they have to operate within the parameters that are available to them, and it's not just a position out of your head. So that's something that I've noticed in the engagement between our two countries, always that mutual respect. The digital method of doing the summit was the novel element. Australia had already done one with Singapore. In India, it caused tremendous excitement, and a lot of coverage was on this aspect. But let's not overdo the virtual aspect. Virtual is fine. But let's remember that Prime Minister Morrison had been due to visit India in mid-January 2020. In fact, I rushed to present my credentials in anticipation. And not only that we have our own prestigious Raisina dialogue in Delhi, and the pride of place was given to Australia. It's not just a coincidence that these things were happening. So we were truly looking forward to Prime Minister Morrison's physical visit to him and discussing many things. Unfortunately, because of the bushfires, it could not happen. But we understand the circumstances. Again, we thought of May, and again, because of the pandemic, it could not happen. And then it was decided to continue the engagement through this virtual summit. We're not satisfied with that. I remember being present in the summit itself, on this side. And the first thing our PM said was, we are not satisfied with this. We want you to come. So that's something which I just mentioned to you. So one way, like you are doing today, the Institute, is to find innovative ways of continuing normal business when conditions are not normal. We have to do it. And, India-Australia relations are far too important to have stop-start. There has to be a kind of continuous activity. Our countries are here to stay. We have a long history, and this pandemic will come and go. And already you have moved to hybrid mode, which itself shows that we're somewhere on the way to a brighter future. We, again, with due respect to my colleagues, and I hope they will concur with me. Some of them have been ambassadors. We professional diplomats, we always have this habit. You go into any country, and your first reaction is, your first expectation is there a turning point? Or you look for turning points. That's how sometimes in analysis you can exaggerate or over-exaggerate, these aspects in your, when you study what's going around. But I do believe that India-Australia, it is a fact that we had those sporadic engagement, and maybe some very unguided kind of contacts continuously. But now it's different. There is a whole series of activities, either they're taking place or we're at the doorstep of such forms of engagement more to come, some very good things to come. So this is indeed a time when, our stars are matching, if we talk in the Asian way, so they are in the same configuration. Let's, in an institution like this, again, let's not lose sight that we are not operating in a vacuum. International relations is, you have to see how the global constellation is like, or configuration is. If you see in the 1990s, I had the chance to work in the former USSR. At the time it disintegrated. It was a landmark event. The world was somewhat divided. So we grew up, many of us, in foreign service with in a world with Cold War and the camps, and we were trying to be non-aligned in this. But after 91, the world just changed. And it created new opportunities for countries like India and Australia. It created spaces. You could operate within those spaces, and it didn't happen instantly. But as you started, your new ways of working in the MFAs and DFATs, you could see that those little options were opening up. And sometimes, through trial and error, you found that you could find those little convergences on issues and on various incidents or events. So that's where you trial and error, you started realizing that, look, there is much much in common between countries like India and Australia. So you found that kind of these countries which are often described as middle powers or regional powers, so for want of other definitions. So we found that we tended to be very, very comfortable in international settings when we had to look at important issues that were before the global community. The second point that I wish to flag is that we know with satisfaction that this relationship enjoys bipartisan support in both countries. It's not surprising, in democratic countries, foreign policies, typically there is a kind of a central part, and it evolves through your consensus building and the national traditions. They go into forging this kind of consensus. You will find that odd here and there's little movements, but within Australia also you could see it. And in 2009, when Labour PM Kevin Rudd visited India, he forged this strategic partnership. I've already mentioned that. And they welcomed the expanding ties and converging approaches. I was in you were very kind enough to mention my own little biodata, and I did serve in the Department of Atomic Energy. I was heading the external relations of the department around that time, and it was a psychological barrier was broken around that time, 2011, when Australia decided to allow export of uranium to India. It was a very brave and very courageous decision, knowing Australia, and we're all transparent societies, so nothing is really secret. In a country like ours, everything comes out. Recently, you had the archives also here, giving other kinds of stories in the public domain. Well, when this happened, I think we understood, we took it well, and we realized that what a huge effort must have gone into this, making a decision like this. And but as I said, it was a psychological barrier which had been broken. And now you look, when you have Prime Minister Scott Morrison, what is the kind of messaging coming out? I mean, virtual summit was fine, but on the eve of the virtual summit, what do I notice? Shadow Foreign Minister Penny Wong telling the government, don't miss this opportunity. She's almost admonishing the government. Look at this kind of, either competitive politics or, politics in which each is competing to, build stronger ties with India, or wanting stronger ties with India. Even today, as I was coming to this event, I noticed another Labour politician talking about this government has not done enough to take in relations with India forward. I won't mention the name, I'm sure it'll come out, but only today, before I came here, I noticed. In India also, I mean, if the Congress party was, part of this building this strategic partnership or relationship, look at it, that, from then on, what's happened, it's taken further and more, the engagement has been more intense over the years. So this is how, we can say that this relationship is not so much necessarily, either a kind of whims and fancies of someone, or it's a kind of sporadic thing. It has its own very strong foundations, I would say, very strong foundation, and we can be satisfied with this, that the future is assured when you have such very strong foundations. From the Indian angle, I would say this, that we are, located in a very difficult region. Sometimes it's quite unique, and sometimes it's described as epicenter of terrorism, where we are located. There are also countries which practice terrorism as an instrument of foreign policy, as a force multiplier. In today's age, understand that there can be countries which do this, the other countries which are not seen to, respect enough international laws, or subscribe to international ways of behaving. But we live there, this is our neighborhood, so we don't have the luxury of an ocean or sea to separate us from these kind of, challenges. But we did notice, I say from my experience with Australia's understanding about the special kind of challenges faced by India went a long way in giving us the confidence that this is the new partnership with Australia. There is that understanding in Australia. Of course, life had changed, 9/11, etc., etc. I mean, the understanding of the world, the tolerance levels, everything had changed, with those kinds of incidents. But the fact is that when Australia stood by us repeatedly, whenever we were confronted by terror, and when we see terror, we know it's terror. So definitions, etc., one can keep arguing, but we know it's terror. So we have dealt with it. What I can say here is, if it helps you in understanding India, that we have now reached a stage in India, from the Indian angle, that there is a mental red line, that no more. I mean, we can deal with terror. We have our capabilities. We can deliver punitive action to any place we like if we find we are threatened. So there is a big change in the way we think, and so this is just from an analytical aspect I bring to your attention. In international diplomacy, there is a importance of personal connect. It is important. But the personalities operate in environments which are available to them. Prime Ministers Modi and Prime Minister Morrison have met 5 times, I believe, during the last 1.5 years, including in the recent virtual summit. Even when I was coming here, I did my routine call on Prime Minister Modi, and I thought it's routine, and literally I just thought I'll be in and out. I told my driver, "Don't worry, I'll be back in a few minutes." But there he was, without notes. He was talking about India-Australia relations with passion and with energy, and none of us looked at the clock or what. I was too afraid to look up lest I miss something, and he was completely into that. So there is that personal investment in this relationship. They understand. Leaders are always that kind in democratic societies. They sense the mood which we professionals don't sense enough. So they know that what is the need of the hour. So definitely, Prime Minister Modi, he has a huge expectation that this is the relationship to nurture and build. And incidentally, Prime Minister Morrison has acquired a huge fan following in India. Just on the eve of summit, he put on his apron and went into the kitchen and produced what is called skomosas. And I found it really hard on the tongue. But in India, I got so many messages, even the act of taking trouble in, conveying this kind of message, that itself shows how much they care for this relationship. So this is really, the amazing. You can talk of the big things, but if you talk of the small things, they show so many different aspects of our country and a relationship between our leaders. So as I said that we have had visits here, 2014, when Prime Minister Modi last came here, that gave additional momentum to this ties. I was nearby in Fiji at that time as High Commissioner, so we're seeing this performance on the stadium, in the stadium, with adoring people, our two leaders, in front of a diaspora and adoring people who all want to see our leaders together, more often, I would say. Very recently, the evolution of our, or in pursuant to our comprehensive strategic partnership, we have agreed to elevate our 2+2 foreign and defense secretary dialogue to ministerial level. This will add more intensity to the positive trajectory of our bilateral relations. It is a bit challenging, because to get two ministers to give the same date is very difficult and time. But I think Australia is only the third country after US and Japan with which India has a ministerial 2+2 dialogue. So be sure, Australia is a very, very special country for us. Those ministers will find the time for Australia. It is a very, very special relationship. We're committed to working together in, international settings. You could, name any format: trilateral, quadrilateral, multilateral. Also, recently India was elected as a non-permanent member of UNSC, but we have aspirations to be a permanent member as well. So we are very obliged to Australia for giving its support, unqualified support, to not only to our non-permanent membership this time, 1st January onwards, we will assume our seat, but also in a reformed United Nations and a reformed UNSC, where we will find a permanent seat. The CSP itself, I'm sure you had a chance to take a look, but it reflects everything that two very close countries will tend to agree on. We agree on a free, open, secure, prosperous, inclusive Indo-Pacific, and we agree, that it's important that this region, there should be that kind of international engagement where there's respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries and adherence to agreed international rules. We agree that that there is a need to promote stability in this shared region. We have a joint maritime declaration emerging at the end of the summit, which reflects the congruent visions of both countries with respect to the Indo-Pacific, to work together for peace and prosperity of our region. So there will be a lot of activity in this Indo-Pacific. It's becoming very, very common, and everything that Australia talks about, we tend to agree, because our PM talks of Sagar, in the Hindi word for sea, and it's really an acronym: security and growth for all in the region. Sagar means sea, so in Hindi. India views the Pacific and Indian Oceans as a contiguous construct sharing similar economic opportunities and security challenges. Some years back, I had, just when in the US itself was working on this concept, they started talking about from Bollywood to Hollywood. There are all kinds of ways of describing this. This is something which is evolving, but we all know that that we are looking for a certain kind of order in this region, where there is a respect for international laws. There is a kind of peaceful engagement. It's a kind of inclusive construct, if you might say, as construct. There are economic opportunities which we can nurture and take forward in this region, which is the primary object of working together. The CSP also, again, we say comprehensive and strategic, and I love this word strategic, and immediately we can get into this, that even the most sensitive of sensitive subjects, our two countries are now ready to work. So even, if I was given today any proposal, my first thing would be, oh, from Australia, let's give it a serious look. So that's how, if I was secretary in Delhi at a, or deputy minister, whichever you might say, the first reactions are very important. And coming from Australia, any proposal I can anticipate, I can predict how it will be treated. That we know from where it's coming. There's a great deal of respect for the process itself, how Australia must have, developed such an initiative. So we are looking at cooperation across the entire spectrum of engagement, including R&D, economic, maritime, defense, education, regional, multilateral, counterterrorism, people to people, everything. And this COVID-19 pandemic, makes us even more committed to work together to strengthen global supply chains. There are critical health, technology, other goods and services. So we have, great interest in working together with Australia. Having been here about, almost 8 months here, and I do take liberty of somewhat digressing from my little, speech or text what I have, but I do notice that, sometimes we're some, maybe I guess like cousins, it seems to me, that we have grown together for some time, we're familiar with each other, but because we've always been known to each other, we may have missed certain changes which have taken place. And I take liberty of just, mentioning that we do, and we are very conscious we are a developing country and have a long way to go, a long way to go. But when you deal with us, you will find some of this, sometimes I would admit even frustrations may well be in the Australian camp. But it comes because we are at once a developing country, and at once we have several features which make us like an advanced country. If you look at certain sectors, the space sector, the nuclear power sector, information technology, pharmaceuticals, entertainment industry, medical treatment, we, if you go to any hospital in India, you'll find absolutely the receptions filled with Africans, Central Asians, Afghans, everyone, looking for medical treatment, advanced medical, even Pakistan. So they're all there in India. So even medical treatment, automobile sector. So you'll find that the other dimensions of India, if you say entertainment industry, it's not just saying that we have Bollywood. Our approaches to intellectual property will flow from that. If our movies are copied and sent all over free of cost to homes, it will trouble us. So these are all certain things which must be factored in, I guess, when people look at India. Even our education institution, believe there are almost 100,000 Indian students getting the world's best education in Australia. But it's not that in India there are no good institutions. It's all about scale. And if you look at the entire CEO list of US, almost in a top list from Satya Nadella, Google, etc., you'll find they've all done high-class education in India. So if you look at English language, it's kind of very difficult to explain, are we an English-speaking country or not? But, we've had a very difficult colonial experience. Every country has its own way of relating to that. And our own rich cultures were in some way crushed. But you will find that English has grown, and we have no problem. And today, I believe we are the second largest, English-speaking country. And if we go like this, we are on our way to be number one as well. So it's very unusual to think of this without trying too hard, And several people speak English at mother tongue level, and yet, Many of our students, when they go to US, they are treated as from a non-English speaking country. So we have several advantages, the way we are positioned. If you look at CNN, you'll find CNN or any other channel, you'll find today in a pandemic or US election, you'll find lots of faces, names all from, of Indian origin who have studied in India actually and gone and done something extra in the US. So these are all things that in a competitive environment also are those who are specialists have gone and proven themselves. So with that comes confidence. When we find that our diaspora, there was a feeling at one time, let me be very honest, that, in an institution like this, one should be honest. This is after all, meant for honest opinion, honest debate. When people were leaving the 70s, 80s, going to Middle East, etc., with some feeling, oh, they're going for a better life, there's a huge change in the way that now we see that when people went and competed and with the best in the toughest of environment, then there is that confidence. Okay, we are not bad. We can compete. We are among the best. So that's reflecting on the way that we think in India. And perhaps the reverse also, that when people who go through a competitive environment like in India and go, even our diplomatic service, 12 to 20, we are selected out of 500,000 people. And it's, if I wrote the exam again, I doubt I would get in again. So it's huge numbers. So that, so if you're trying to understand the psychology, that's how Indians would be. A few more points and then I'm done. I can talk to big things, and I notice you have set up a space setup institution and space agency. We have been at it some years from the 60s onwards, and in case you didn't know, you have touching 100 years. We are touching 75 in 2 years from now, and our target is to put a man in space in 2 years. It's announced. Actually, the first capsule would have been launched in December. Marginal, maybe it'll go a few months later on because of the pandemic, situation. So there are a lot of opportunities not to reinvent the wheel. We can, as friendly countries, work together, and then there is again the defense cooperation. We noticed that you have the Australian Defense Strategic Update 2020, very interesting. 270 billion in the next 10 years. But if you want that 270 billion to go further distance, it may be useful to work with a country like India. And for us, certainly it would be very useful. We are now into that phase of even making complete platforms, and already the indigenous jet fighter has been inducted. We are making aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines as well, but we're making the conventionals as well, light helicopters. So there is a lot of interest that working with a country like India, and since we have both complementary technical skills, I think there would be tremendous interest in both countries. And we had an agreement signed during the virtual summit, which allows us cooperation in the science and technology aspects of defense. I think trade is always of interest in Australia, certainly for us as well. And, I think even while, Australia is challenged on different fronts, and looking towards India, we have our own specific characteristics. But even with that, having said that, we don't have a free trade arrangement with Australia the way that perhaps is expected here, not as yet. But remember that Australia still exports 3 times more than it imports from India. So we are not a problem for you. We're not a threat in that sense, and we're open. And again, as having been in certain decision-making positions, what I would say is that there is such warmth for Australia, such a great appreciation for the way this relationship has shaped, that if there were very specific initiatives to arrive at such trade arrangements in the short term and the long term, and we had a dialogue to address our respective interests, believe me, that there will be a lot of sympathy, and there will be effort to make it happen. That's something on the trade front. I think we're coming that investment. Let me turn the tables. India is a different country, a difficult country. I've often heard that in my 8 months, but I've also heard, it may be interesting for you, some of our own investors have said exactly the same about Australia, that they've struggled with their projects and it's gone on. But I have spent a lot of time on the commercial side and diplomatic missions. I always appreciate good feedback and good suggestions from businessmen. And the Indian government is always ready to improve things. But businessmen are tough people, and I respect them for that. And those who stick it out, they find their ways of doing things. And in the end, those who understand, respect democratic ways of processing large projects and smaller trade, addressing small issues. To many of our Indian investors who stuck around here, they're finding that things are moving. So they're really appreciating. I think there's some more areas which really are interesting and with a future. That is in South Pacific, that's an area which you have great expertise, and these are all countries with very, very unique characteristics, some of the loveliest countries on earth, but challenged in other ways, climate or environment, etc., etc. Australia has huge expertise, but we also have certain kinds of linkages with them. If you look at a country like Fiji, for instance, we even had deep ethnic linkages. Hindi is one of the official languages of Fiji. So we have in the summit decided to work together in these places and find best models for working together. So these are all interesting areas. Again, in the pharmaceutical side, during the pandemic, everybody is holding on to their medical supplies, and we're happy. Hydroxychloroquine, which President Trump often talks of, paracetamol, melt-blown fiber. These are some items we were very, very happy to, for Australia, make those exceptions, much as we needed them ourselves. You may be surprised that even when we talk of vaccines, India is the largest, or India's one company is the largest manufacturer of vaccines in the world. So any vaccine which comes out, there is an expectation that India would be part of that manufacturing exercise. We have our own research and trials going on our own vaccines as well. We have a very, very strong pharmaceutical industry, and we are two countries very happily. One of the outcomes of the virtual summit is to work together to look at this COVID-19 challenge. I think the last point, if I miss, then I wouldn't be complete. That is, well, we know that Indians and Australians fought on the same side in the World War I, Gallipoli, but the same side, but we are often on the opposite side in cricket, and there have been some memorable battles against each other on the cricket field, and but then again, it's become so complex, that you find my own, I come from the city of Hyderabad, and our franchise is captained by Warner, David Warner. So whom do you cheer for, So life has become so complicated now. Your heroes become ours. Actually, we made a big mistake in cricket. Some years back, Dennis Lilly went down and started the MRF Pace Foundation. And we never thought we could produce fast bowlers. And today we are able to do, thanks to Australian technology and expertise. And that's what makes life so interesting. And I think more or less I'm done for the start. When I was in school, I read a book, Town Like Alice, and my wish was to land here and go there, visit that place. Unfortunately, because of pandemic, I have not been able to do that as yet. This is an exciting time, as I said right at the outset. I repeat this at the end, the message at the end, and the sky is the limit. Last week was our Independence Day that I also mentioned, but what PM Morrison said, the deep friendship between India and Australia is more than trade and diplomacy. It's based on what in Hindi we say, bharosa, trust, and samman, respect. So this is what he said. PM Modi was very cryptic. Fully agree with what my friend PM Morrison says about India-Australia. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive review, High Commissioner. Now, we've got some time for questions, so I might invite questions, first of all, from our in-house audience, and then take one or two from our online audience. And in making a question, could you just identify yourself? I think Ernst is showing his hand there. Brad, thanks.
Ernst Wilhelm, a member of the Canberra branch and a retired lawyer. Thank you for a very comprehensive survey of bilateral relations. I'd like to pick up one area that you touched on, and that's the 2011 agreement between Australia and India, which allowed export of Australian uranium to India. I think you said that that removed a psychological barrier. From the Australian perspective, it was a massive legal issue as well. And the legal issue essentially was that India is a nuclear power, as is your neighbour, and neither you nor Pakistan are members of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So that raises problems for countries like Australia in relation to safeguards. Under the Australian process for a bilateral treaty, we had a parliamentary committee looking at the treaty. And there were a number of submissions made to that committee expressing concern that the treaty would allow India to engage in high-level enrichment of Australian uranium without Australian consent. Some of those submissions came from a former head of the Australian Atomic Energy Commission, a former Australian ambassador to the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, and I made a submission also. And the parliamentary committee, in its report, asked the government to make available the government's analysis of the treaty, because clearly the submissions said that Australia would in effect be in breach of safeguards, and the government refused to do that, which meant that there was no transparency from the Australian side. My question to you is, what was the reaction in India to the concerns expressed by members of the Australian community to that bilateral treaty, and in particular to the concern that India was able to engage in high-level enrichment of Australian uranium without Australian consent?
I think it is too complex a subject to get into, in a few minutes. But as I said, it was a brave decision. It is for Australia to sort out its own approaches. It's not for us to interfere. Australia took its own decision and changed its position. That's entirely for Australia. Whether they took into account X factor or Y factor, that's really, again, for introspection on Australia's side. But I think it was, India was given an exception, the energy exemption. And India is the country with the energy exemption. And certain kind of, I would advise you to take a close look at Indo-US agreement, which gives a kind of, and a joint statement of 2005, which will give you an understanding that how we more or less recognized each other, the India and US, which formed the basis for subsequent understandings where India was recognized as a country with advanced capabilities, like a country such as the United States. So it's quite, I think lawyers have their role, but lawyers, my understanding is lawyers are there to facilitate policies, and we had some wonderful international lawyers who did that facilitation, and we thank them. We thank Australia for its decision.
We'll take one more question from the floor and then pass to our online audience. David?
Thank you. Hello, David Brewster from the National Security College. Thank you, sir, for an excellent discussion on growing bilateral ties. I was wondering if I could focus your attention on the Indian Ocean region, our shared oceanic space, where I suppose there'll be, we could expect much cooperation between Australia and India in coming years. I was wondering if you could perhaps let us know your thoughts on what would be the few key areas of potential cooperation between Australia and India in that space, whether it be in developing regional architecture, coalitions of countries, whether there's what specific problems do you think that Australia and India should be focusing on working together in that space?
As I said, that we are increasingly becoming conscious of our shared geography, and we have convergence as far as our approaches are concerned. But to set time frames or milestones, I think that may not be the right way of approaching. Things will tend to evolve. That is the way I look at it. At the various conversations, you have to give them a little time before they settle. But within this crucible, you'll find things happening. We have our own bilateral engagement with Australia, which has relevance for the multilateral aspects. We are also on environmental issues, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Australia has been very kind to be a co-sponsor on that. There is solar initiatives. On the defense side, we have our own bilateral exercises. So these various kinds of activities, joint activities, and in other frameworks, they all, I think we have to give them a little opportunity before setting a time frame that there will be an architecture of this kind at the end. So I think it's a process that we are looking at right now, and it's a very comfortable process for us while we are working with Australia and certain like-minded countries. But we think that it will evolve in the right direction because there is no other way.
Hi, Commissioner. You've mentioned trade and investment relations between Australia and India. A couple of our online participants are also interested in the economic dimension of the relationship, and one in particular, Dr. Macaulay, formerly from the ANU, is asking about, can you describe the economic barriers that remain between Australia and India, and what's the time frame for addressing those? And also Conley Tyler, formerly National Executive Director of the Institute, is asking about a release of an India-Australia economic strategy paper prepared by a former colleague in Anil Wadwar, I believe.
Right.
So I would invite you to comment on those matters.
Well, let me do the second question first. That some years back, 2018, we had this Varghese report, which is much talked of, and India report, and it was decided to have a kind of mirror report for Australia, our report for Australia, and it was not just in terms of substance, but there's a lot of symbolism also that if we produce a report for Australia, it shows that we are attaching so much significance to economic ties with Australia. 2018, the Varghese report, of course, was released when our president came here. We were ready with the Varghese report. So that is also true, and unfortunately, that when everything was ready, came the pandemic, and the world around us has changed. There was this natural line of thinking that if we release a report which has not taken into account the pandemic, we're talking of global supply chains. We all know what it means. Even the education aspect, if it's not going to be that much, that kind of free movement. So it's undergoing one more look, so that it reflects the times. So as far as the Wadhwa report is concerned, that we look forward to having it in the public domain at an early opportunity. But then it must cover those new circumstances which have emerged. As far as India-Australia's relations are concerned, I think there is a great deal of interest in working, but I think there's not enough knowledge. There is also certain kinds of differences in the way that our economies are. Ours has a huge agriculturally dependent population, and we are actually among the biggest producers of fruits, vegetables, grains. So it's difficult, to do certain things, and so we are not a replacement for any other country. The second thing is our own, let me be frank here, that when we look at Australia, we have also found that, while Australia is already 3 times more than us in terms of exports, so we're not a threat in that sense. But when we try to export, there are some difficulties in Australia, some kind of barriers which our businessmen do complain. But businessmen are like that. It's really that our 2 governments are so committed to each other, and what emerges from the CSP is that we could actually have a early harvest agreement, that what are the items of great importance and significance to Australia, and what are the items of great significance. In a short time, we could really work together, and we are also engaged in a dialogue. So I think I'm optimistic that, taking into account the political relationship, taking the overall bonhomie and friendly relations, and in this pandemic situation where every country is looking at its own economic prospect, now in this change time, I think there's a great deal of interest in arriving at something with Australia.
Thank you. Some of our questioners are asking a bit more about defence and security relations, and referring to the Quad which you mentioned there. How does India look at Australia's, what Australia can bring to the Quad arrangement in defence and security terms?
Well, we have a great interest in bilateral engagement with Australia in defense. It's not simply about defense exercises or exporting an item. We are actually interested in developing platforms together, actually. So that shows that we are looking to build a kind of partnership with various elements within the Australian defense sector, and that will make our own defense industry. We have a huge requirement. Now, as far as in multilateral formats, I think they will evolve, and these are all, it just happens when the time is right, as diplomats would say, that, everything should be in the right place. Things will happen and move on that front. I see no barrier to anything that, we set out to do, but it's all about timing, when exactly that it will be possible. But defense cooperation is something that we are really excited about with Australia.
Are there any questions from our in-house audience at this stage? All right, we've got plenty here from our online participants. A question from Charlie Guay. Pardon me if I've got your name wrong there, but Excellency, how will India's new education policy strengthen the ties between Australian and Indian universities and students?
Well, I think there had been increasingly Indian students. They have been discovering that Australia offers world-class institutions and education. And in the Global 100, you find several Australian educational institutions. We had almost 100,000 students a few months back. I don't know how the pandemic has changed, how much it has changed. But, for a country like India, we again look for other ways of working with a country like Australia. And I said we have some excellent institutions in India. But in India, everything is about upscaling. You can do something, and but the size is so huge and the demand is so huge. So I think the new education policy does envisage that those kind of situations where globally ranked universities can set up shop in India, and we're looking forward to that, some more traction on that. But that is what we want. We want our students to avail of education here, high quality education, and we want high quality education from Australia to come to India.
Well, thank you very much, High Commissioner. If there are no further questions from the floor, we might bring proceedings to a close. And with great thanks for coming and joining in our technological digital experiment this evening. We think it's been a success. We thank you very much for your insights, and look forward to you attaining your bucket list wish to get to Alice Springs as soon as possible.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings to a conclusion tonight's proceedings, but I just want to let everyone know at this stage we have another couple of very interesting presentations lined up for September, and we encourage you to seek us out on the AIIA website for details to register for those. So good evening to you all. Thanks for coming this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.